In this episode, we talk about how many planets you can fit into a solar system, the story starting point hidden in full view, and sublight and faster-than-light travel.
Hello, you're listening to the SciFi Ideas podcast. I'm Mark Ball, featuring David Ball.
Hello. What do you mean featuring?
As in, like, musicians. As in featuring some rapper.
I'm not doing any music. I'm not doing any rapping. Rapping about sci-fi. Right, let's get on with the podcast.
Okay, in this episode, we are going to talk about propulsion methods and faster-than-light propulsion. We actually recorded an episode all about this a while ago, and I lost part of the recording, unfortunately. So
that was the best podcast that we've ever recorded.
It was a really interesting discussion. I feel really bad about that.
That would have been our best one.
So we're going to try and recreate the magic, and it definitely won't be as good as that one. Oh well. But at least I've done some research, a small amount of research this time.
Do you know how much research I've done?
0?
Yeah. Well, no, I looked at an article. I looked at a blog article about 5 minutes ago. Right, are we going straight into talking about propulsion
Before
systems?
we get on to that, we'll treat that as the main thread.
Yeah.
But before we get on to that, a couple of little things that we need to mention. There's another issue of Sci-Fi Max magazine. It's just come out.
I've not looked at this one.
I haven't had a good look yet. I've kind of thumbed through and seen that I've got a story in there, a piece of flash fiction.
That's
and
good.
We've got a full page ad for Sci-Fi Ideas as well.
A full page? Excellent.
Yeah, brilliant. So I thought we definitely need to give that a plug in return.
Yeah. Well, I looked at it last time, and they've got some brilliant artwork, and they've got some brilliant stories and stuff in there.
Yeah, and a lot more articles have gone in this time as well.
More? It's quite big anyway. Wow.
It is. It's substantial. To say it's a free magazine, yeah. Free online magazine, I should say.
So it's
available
like it's a downloadable
at
PDF,
issue.com. Yes.
Sorry, well, it's not a PDF, but it's a downloadable print thing. You open it as if it's a magazine, but it's on your computer.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah.
On issue.com, but also the Facebook page is probably the easier way to find it. Sci-Fi Max magazine. Check it out.
So what's happened since the last time we recorded a podcast?
Well, aside from sharing a lot of artifacts in videos, I think the biggest article I've put on the site is about death lotteries, which we talked about in the last episode of the podcast.
Ah, we did, yeah. And I was reading that. I was reading that this morning. You talked about an episode of Sliders where they had a death lottery. Sliders was good for this, wasn't
yes.
it? Exploring different social things.
It was, yeah. It was an episode where there was a cash machine giving out free money, and for every $1 that you took out, it was another ticket in this death lottery.
Oh, right, okay. So people didn't have to take the money.
No, but if they chose to, they're running the risk of being entered into the lottery.
Oh, right, okay.
And they were actually, obviously, the characters, the Sliders, they didn't realise what it was, and they were just withdrawing lots of money. And there was this big crowd gathered round them and said something like, "You've got to respect these high rollers." And because the population was so small, or kept to an ideal level, the state was very wealthy. It was a very affluent society, so they could afford to give out this free money. Which,
right.
The economics of that is a little bit dubious, but
well, I would have thought that with more people, you have more prosperity because you've got more people. But I suppose then you also have you've got a lot of pensioners, a lot of old people to look after. You've got a lot of people
exactly, it's mouth
not in work.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, complicated.
Mm.
So what else you've got? You've got starting point, hiding in full view, which I really liked this one.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Can I read it out?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, right. Starting point, hiding in full view, and there's a picture of a big building. Did you look at the building when you wrote the story, or did you find it afterwards?
I did, yeah. Most of these starting points actually start with the image. I see an interesting picture online, and I start to then think about what story I can get from it.
Okay. 2 centuries had passed since the sealing of the Ark. 2 centuries, and nobody raised an eyebrow to question what was going on inside its walls, or whether the self-proclaimed survivors were even alive. That's not true. Questions had been asked, but for decades now, nobody had put any serious effort into finding an answer. Most just assumed it to be a tomb. The MX-109 Air Lane Expressway had been routed within a mile of the giant monument, seemingly an arrogant disregard of the survivors' self-imposed isolation, and now thousands of vehicles streamed past the windowless cube every hour. Of all those vehicles, some of their occupants must have engaged a passing curiosity about the contents of the Ark, if only for a second as they zipped by. However, it's fair to assume that most did not. Some would simply be looking the other way. A careful few might actually be keeping their eyes on the air lane ahead. Many would stare mindlessly through their screens and look through the object as though it wasn't even there, distracted to the point of arrogance by their in-vehicle entertainment systems. There had been a TV drama speculating about what might be going on inside the walls of the Ark. It was a kid show, and it wasn't very good. It had been cancelled after only 1 season with the story arc left unfinished. Fiction is for children, curiosity for the immature. Even if one of those passing vehicles had bothered to pull out of the sky lane and investigate further, as I had done once, they would find little of interest. The walls of the Ark were solid, smooth, and featureless. There were no signs of anything resembling an entrance or exit, nor anything suggesting a way to communicate with the interior. The children's cartoon had suggested that the survivors entered through the roof, that the entire top of the Ark opened like an enormous cereal box, but that wasn't true. There was only one way into the Ark, and that was from beneath. I had to turn 2 miles off the sky lane to find the tunnel entrance, and a further mile to find a good place to land. The landscape was paved with uneven rock, cut by signs of some ancient industry, and dotted with tiny pools of rainwater. The door itself was of solid metal construction, the kind you might find on a submarine or at the heart of a fusion plant. No markings indicated where it led, nor did they warn against intrusion. The only word written there in the alcove read, "Naz was here." Down 2 concrete steps, the entrance was guarded by a moat of water, urine, and empty beer cans. It hardly looked like the doorway to a secret world, but this had to be it. Predictably, it was sealed shut. So, that's a starting point about, well, this place that's a mystery. And you know what it reminds me of?
Inside? Go on.
Well, there are places like this, aren't there? You know, there's buildings that you pass every day and you think, well, you might not even think what they're about, but there could be anything going on inside.
One of the things that kind of inspired me was in Sheffield there used to be these cooling towers right by the motorway. This double-layered motorway overpass, wasn't it? And it's like the entire city goes past it every day. These cooling towers were right there, these great looming objects. Of course, there's nothing interesting in a cooling tower. It's just steam. But I thought it was quite a dramatic thing.
But there could have been anything inside.
Yeah. Could be like a Torchwood building.
Could be like a Torchwood building. It could be like, what was that? There's a
Warehouse
film,
13.
I think it's called Shooting Fish, where a guy lives in not a cooling tower, but like one of those gas towers. You know, those that expand. They get taller when they're filled with gas. He lives inside one of those. I thought that looked really cool.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, this
there
story...
are these things, aren't there, that we drive past all the time and don't bother to pull off the road to investigate. And
well, yeah. And you kind of assume that it's probably owned by someone and you shouldn't be having a look around. But there might be something really interesting going on. So what else have we had on the site? We had a planet profile. The Planet of Damnation.
Oh, by Alfonso Posadas.
Yes.
A planet that's been terraformed to be hell as a prison planet. And it's a tidally locked planet, so one side constantly faces the sun and is burning hot, and the other side is freezing cold and perpetually dark, and that's where the prison is.
Planets. Okay.
But I was quite fascinated with this idea about the whole planet is a prison. So there's huge infrastructure around the prisons, but all the wardens and all their families live there in the twilight zone where it's not too hot, not too cold. And I'm interested in reading a story about them. This is what fascinates me, is not the prisons themselves, but the wider society. that would exist around a prison planet.
Yeah, of course, because you've got people who are living on this really horrible place that don't deserve to live in horrible conditions.
Yeah.
And they're living on the good side of it. But then, I don't know, it's kind of reminiscent of a rich-poor thing, isn't it?
Yeah, well, this is the duality of prison society anyway, of the guards and the inmates, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I like that kind of duality. I think that makes for interesting stories and interesting like dystopian societies and such.
Yeah. So we're encouraging someone to take that idea and...
oh, absolutely. Absolutely, yeah. There's an article that I'd like to talk about that I haven't put on the website. This is an article from New Scientist magazine.
Okay.
That I might write an article about it, actually. About how many planets can you fit into a solar system.
Oh, I saw you shared that on Facebook.
Yeah, have you read it? It's really interesting.
I haven't read it, but I saw the picture.
It's about this, he's an astrophysicist, Sean Raymond of Bordeaux Observatory in France, has created a model of the perfect solar system for habitability. It's got 60-odd planets in this star system. 60-odd habitable planets.
So those 60-odd planets are in the Goldilocks zone?
Yes. And this is actually theoretically possible, not probable at all. This really probably wouldn't form naturally, but an advanced society, an advanced civilization could actually build this solar system in theory. It's interesting how he's managed to squeeze so many planets into stable orbits. Orbits that would last for billions of years without deteriorating.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
I'm surprised by that, because I thought just because of the eventual nature of things going... What if something goes wrong? Suddenly all planets are affected just because one of them's, I don't know, shifted out of orbit a tiny little bit.
And that's one of the reasons why this wouldn't occur in nature, because nature does throw disasters at star systems.
Yeah. Okay.
Also, I don't think the amount of material would be there in the right places and distributed evenly enough for this to form. But it's an interesting kind of thought experiment anyway, and it's useful for those of us wanting to create systems with multiple planets for, say, like a Firefly type scenario, or
where it's all in one solar system.
Yeah.
Because actually that makes more sense as a story than, say, the Star Trek way of travelling to different planets and stars that are so far apart. It makes sense if they're all in one solar system, because we can move about in our own solar system.
Yeah, it cuts out the need for faster-than-light travel, which can be pretty awkward.
Yeah. Sounds like we're building up to our main topic quite well.
Yeah, kind of, although we're actually saying that you don't need faster-than-light propulsion. And then we'll tell you how to do faster-than-light propulsion, yeah. Let's have a look at how he's made this star system then, because this is interesting.
Okay.
First of all, it's a binary star system, so it's got two stars, so that's kind of cheating a bit.
Is it cheating, or is it just making it more complicated and more likely that things will go wrong?
There is that, yeah.
So I always thought, in a binary star system, would planets orbit in like a figure of 8?
No, that's not likely. Well, it's possible.
Because that seems like it's prone to go wrong.
Yeah. And I think the stars would have to be of exactly the same mass or something. I'm not sure.
Oh, good point, yeah.
Anyway, he's chosen red dwarf stars, because red stars, apparently, they live longer, or they stay in their current state longer, and they also have a larger habitable zone, the area at which liquid water is possible. I'm not sure why. I think it's something to do with the wavelength of red light, perhaps. I don't know.
Right.
But the habitable zone is actually larger, so you can get more planets in there. And he's saying that there's room for 6 orbital paths in that habitable zone.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's quite a lot.
So kind of imagine there's Venus on the inner edge of our habitable zone, Mars on the outer edge. You could get 6 Earths in that space between.
Okay.
But he hasn't just got 6 planets there. He's got planets sharing orbits. And so around his first star, he's got planets with very large moons, or twin planets.
Right.
where the moon is almost as big as the main planet, or as big as, and they orbit each other. They orbit at a central Barry point, while still going around the star in the same regular motion.
Right, okay.
Like Caprica and Gemini in the new Star series are apparently like that. They have twin worlds.
Yeah, but did they ever mention that?
In Caprica,
right.
Yeah, they hinted at it. You could actually see Gemini in the sky from Caprica.
Right, okay. What, quite close?
Yeah, very close. Too close, actually.
Oh, right, okay. Well, this that you're talking about here, if you've got six planets all orbiting, they're going to get very close to each other, aren't they?
Well, that's how it looks on the image that he's provided, but actually the distances involved here are vast.
Okay, right.
You think about how tiny a planet is.
Well, I suppose.
It's just a speck.
But you'd have thought that the mass would attract another planet whenever it...
You would think so, wouldn't you? I've always wondered how many you can squeeze in before they start to affect each other's orbits. And yeah, apparently in a habitable zone of this size, you can get 6 orbital paths. It's quite astonishing. This must be the absolute maximum, though.
But you said that some of them share an orbital path, and that would make sense, so that they'd never touch each other. Yes.
Basically, what he's done here, he's got these pairs orbiting a central Barry point, so they're kind of acting as a single planet. They're a single, like, Earth-Moon system orbiting each other, because the Moon pulls the Earth slightly. But then, on each orbital path, you've actually got 2 of these pairs, and they're in each other's Lagrange points, so that they actually stay the same distance from each other as they orbit.
Right.
I'll explain that a bit more as I talk about the second star in this system, because that's a bit more, slightly more interesting use of the same idea, where he put some Jupiter-sized planets in here, and he's got 4 of them, and they have habitable moons orbiting them.
Right.
And then, in each of the Jupiter planets' Lagrange points, he's got another pair of twin worlds. So these Lagrange points, Jupiter, well, all planetary systems, all large objects have these points. Right. The Earth has them, the Moon has them. Jupiter obviously has the largest ones, being such a large body, and it has meteorites trapped in these Lagrange points. This is a point where an object can orbit the Sun and the planet equally, and so it will maintain its position relative to both the star and the planet.
So it's not moving at all. Well, it's moving, but you don't see it moving because it's
orbiting at the same speed as Jupiter, around the same path, one behind it and one in front of it on the orbital path.
Right. Okay. Is he saying then that people would be able to live on these asteroids?
Well, he's actually, instead of the asteroids, he's got pairs of twin planets in those points.
Oh, I see. Right. Okay.
So completely maxing out what you can do here.
A pair of twin planets? What, like orbiting each other?
Orbiting each other, orbiting at a central Barry point like Caprica and Gemini. In these Lagrange points.
Are these planets, are we talking planets the same size as Earth?
He's got them being various sizes.
Right, okay. I'm wondering about the social impact on all this, because you've obviously got a lot of different planets, and would you end up having, alliances between some planets that are close to each other? Feuds with ones that are further away? You said that there's 2 stars. Would there be an alliance of the planets going around one star, and then, would they be at war with the ones orbiting the other?
Absolutely. With all these pairs, you've got, again, this kind of an opportunity for this kind of duality that I say makes stories quite interesting. So you could have pairs of planets at war with other pairs of planets. You could have each solar system at war with the other, and yeah.
I suppose because they're pairs, there's a natural ally there, isn't there?
Yes.
They feel closer, and
although they might be threatened by the one that's really close to them as well, actually.
They could be, yeah. They could have an alliance with the ones further away, but be at war with the one that's really close.
Yeah. Or that's assuming that there are people who evolved on each of these planets You're not likely to have a society originating on each planet, are you?
No, I assume not. Yeah, that's a good point. Life probably wouldn't evolve on each one. Although, well, why not?
Well, if we're talking about scientific probability, then this system just wouldn't occur naturally anyway, and it would have to be built by an advanced society.
Yes, true.
But yeah, it's an interesting scenario. You don't obviously have to go the whole hog and have 60 planets, because that is overkill. But this teaches a little bit about how we can put planets in different orbits and how we can get more bang for our buck.
Yeah.
more real estate from the solar system. That's a better analogy.
I think then we should encourage, listeners to this and viewers of the site to do that.
Oh, yes.
To write a story about it, and we could feature it on SciFi Ideas.
Yes, absolutely.
Right, there you go. There's a challenge. I like to set people challenges. Right, shall we move on to something else?
Right, yeah.
Another article that has been published fairly recently. Well, not that recent. Well, yeah, quite recently. Better Than Starship's Satellites by Stephen Lyle Jordan.
Ah, yes.
Have we talked about that before?
We have. We've talked about this on the podcast.
I think we have. Before. Yeah, okay, let's not talk it to death. But it's a very good article, and he just basically makes the point: why would we need to leave Earth behind and travel to other far-off solar systems or whatever when we could just look after our Earth? And it kind of sounds like a global warming message, doesn't it? Really, but
a little bit.
It's a good point.
Stewardship of the Earth. Well, what is it?
Stewardship, and I think he says about. I think he uses the word husbandry as well. Just taking good care of Earth.
The case he's making here is actually that it's daft to leave the Earth and go in search of another Earth that might not have the resources that we need. Well, we know that we have these resources here, and even if climate change makes life very difficult on Earth, even if a massive meteor smacks into the Earth is still going to be a very, very useful place to be.
Yeah, it's better than, out in space where there's nothing.
Exactly.
That's the second time now we've talked about the pointlessness of FTL. So let's talk about FTL.
Brilliant. Right. Well, I've actually got a list prepared of different types of propulsion to go through. They start with slower than light propulsion.
I've got some others as well.
Okay.
And I bet mine are better than yours. But you go first.
Okay, first on the list is nuclear pulse propulsion. This is something that I've written an article about several years ago, actually, so I'll link to that in the show notes.
Yeah.
The idea of nuclear pulse propulsion is you chuck nuclear bombs out of the back of your spaceship. Sounds a little bit crazy. They explode, and you have a pusher plate on the back of your spaceship that is pushed by that shockwave, and you just keep chucking loads and loads of these bombs out and riding that shockwave.
So it's like a rocket jump in Team Fortress.
All right.
You ever played that?
I haven't. No.
You jump and then you use a bazooka or whatever to fire that at the ground or a grenade.
Yeah.
And then the physics will just kind of propel you upwards, so you're doing like a really, really a big jump.
Yeah. That's exactly
so
what it is.
Essentially, same thing.
Huge nuclear warheads. Now, this was an idea proposed in the 60s, 70s. There was something called Project Orion, which was a planned mission to Jupiter. It's going to be a manned mission to Jupiter. It's going to be a generational ship. With a big ship
people
with
on board?
Yes, and it will be chucking
Really?
these. Yeah, and I think they were actually thinking of launching it from the Earth using this drive.
No way.
Just ridiculous,
no, you can't launch it using a nuke.
In, Siberia or a Pacific island or something. Nobody cares if it gets destroyed.
God.
So that later they moved to ideas of only finding the drive in orbit, which is sensible.
Yeah.
But obviously this drive was never built. And thank God.
Yeah. Right.
There's a really good example of this drive being used in science fiction in a show called Virtuality that never got made.
I remember you saying about it, yeah.
Yeah, there's just a pilot episode by Ronald D. Moore.
With Jamie Lannister.
Jamie Lannister as the lead, yes.
I've not seen it, but Yeah, you've said about it.
It was going to be about travelling to another solar system, but in the pilot episode, we got to the edge of the solar system where they fired up this nuclear pulse drive, and it was visually absolutely stunning. I'd recommend watching the pilot just for that.
Yeah, well, it's so difficult to get enthusiastic about watching a pilot for a series that doesn't exist.
I know.
Oh, well.
I had nothing else to watch, put it that way. So let's move on to Project Daedalus, or Daedalus.
Okay.
I don't know what the right way to say it is. I say Daedalus. This was another proposal that came from the 70s for a contained fusion drive. Right. So, whereas with nuclear pulse, you're chucking nuclear bombs out of the back, with this, you're detonating the nuclear explosion in a contained area.
Is this a constant thing then?
Yes, it's a fusion rocket that would be powered by helium-3 pellets, and according to my research, it would detonate 125 of these pellets per second.
Right, that's quite a lot.
Yeah.
How big are the pellets?
I'm not sure. So that's kind of useless information, isn't it? But anyway, this is obviously much more efficient because with nuclear pulse, most of the energy from that explosion is going to waste. It's not touching your ship. But if it's contained, then you're using most of that energy.
Right, okay. So I assume they've got a kind of a cup shape on the back. Like a...
Pretty much, that's the images that I see.
Like a rocket has.
Yes.
It directs the energy downwards.
Yes.
Obvious, isn't it, really?
Yeah. So this is a much more efficient drive. And what they were planning to do with this, with Project Daedalus, was go to Barnard's Star.
Oh, okay.
It would be an unmanned mission. It would accelerate for 4 years.
Right.
It would then
4 years.
It would then cruise for 46 years, and then it would have to somehow decelerate once it got to Barnard's Star.
Oh yeah, somehow. Did they think of that?
Well, I think they would just turn it around and fire the rocket there, and I suppose decelerate for 4 years.
Yeah.
But the amount of helium-3 pellets that we'd need to complete this mission, we would apparently have to mine them from Jupiter. Yeah. And this project describes setting up a helium mining facility in orbit around Jupiter, this dangling a pipeline in that's collecting all this helium from Jupiter. That in itself is a massive engineering project.
Yeah, yeah.
This is just...
That sounds really cool, though.
This is just to go to Barnard's Star, where there's nothing, and
I remember Barnard's Star from
to
Elite.
do it.
Do you remember playing Elite and then going to Barnard's Star and you realise there's nothing there?
No.
Elite was brilliant. You could just drive around the galaxy.
So basically, the entire point of all of this is just to prove that we could do it. And taking 50 years and costing God knows how much.
Yes, it would be. Am I also right in thinking that helium is running out on Earth?
Yes, apparently so. Scientists are advising us not to use helium balloons.
Because we're just wasting it all.
We are, and they need it for lasers. Oh
yeah, of course they do, yeah. So every time someone breathes it in to make their voice go all squeaky, they're just wasting it.
Yeah, just think
scientists could be using it.
You could be using that to go to Barnard's Star. in your children's lifetime, possibly.
Right, what other drives you got? What drive?
Next on the list, solar sail, which is one possible way of decelerating Project Daedalus. Obviously, got to Barnard's Star. Solar sails, yeah, they do work. We have built them in orbit. They've been used. They are... Well, I would say they're not very efficient, but they're actually very efficient because they're not using any fuel.
Whoa. NASA has solar sails.
I don't know if it was NASA. I think it was a Japanese company that put...
I know they've got solar panels on satellites and things, but not solar sails.
They've tested solar sails, yeah. There've been, I think, 2 satellites. Just testing the concept. Very small satellites, very large sails.
The thing about solar sails, I've never been knocked down by sunlight. I don't think sunlight has ever moved me. I never felt sunlight and thought, whew, that's really pushing me away.
Yeah, but then you've not been in space where there's virtually no friction.
Well, I suppose, but just
Okay,
give it a push.
for
be
very
faster.
small satellites, to use them to kind of manoeuvre into slightly different positions, it makes perfect sense. For travelling vast distances, it seems a bit, well, not very powerful. But apparently these things really do come into play when you're travelling long distance, because you've got, with a big voyage, you've got the time and the space to accelerate.
It's constant as well. That's the good thing about it. It's
yeah.
constant. It's not like the wind where it's windy a bit and then it stops.
Yeah.
But anything's better. You know, in WALL-E, the film WALL-E,
mm-hmm.
where he has a fire extinguisher. You know, even that's better than solar power.
Chucking spanners out the back is better.
Yeah, just stand on it and just keep throwing things.
But no, this is plausible. And long distance, you can actually get up quite a lot of speed. But you can equip a solar sail with a laser. You can fire a laser at a solar sail to make it go faster.
True. But wouldn't that, punch through the sail?
Apparently not.
Right, warp drive.
Hang on, not done yet. Bussard ramjets. This is an interesting one.
Oh, Bussard ramjets, okay.
And this is part of Star Trek's warp drive, not an essential
part. Well, they call it a ram scoop. So in Star Trek,
yes.
The red thing on the
front of the warp
front
nacelle
of the engine
is a Bussard ram scoop. Yes.
So that was supposed to suck in stuff.
It sucks in hydrogen. Yes.
You saw it in one of the last films that was terrible, where Riker was
Insurrection. Yeah.
Insurrection, yeah. In the Bri Patch, they sucked stuff in, didn't they, and then chucked it out the back.
Lots of gas, yeah, and then ignited it.
Yeah.
Basically, what the Bussard ramjet does is it takes in hydrogen from a huge area of space in front of the craft. It uses magnetic fields to scoop in all the hydrogen that's just sitting around in space. Because space isn't empty, there's a lot of hydrogen there. It's just spread out. So it's scooping all that in with a big magnetic field and using that same magnetic field to compress it in the centre of the craft until it actually combusts and becomes a rocket and fires the jet out the back.
Oh, okay. Is there enough hydrogen just in space, which, as far as I know, isn't really anything?
There's a lot of hydrogen.
Now you're saying there is.
Yeah,
but there's not a lot, though, is there? Otherwise,
it's spread
it would
out.
Be something, but it's not. It's a vacuum.
It's near vacuum. It's not a total vacuum.
I know it's near vacuum, but near vacuum means there's not much there.
The idea is you have just a huge magnetic field stretching out for kilometres. Or even more, that's sucking it all in. And the faster you go, the more hydrogen you're going to encounter and suck in.
Ah, so it's exponential.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which also, there's a theoretical speed limit for spaceships. It's actually below light speed because of all the hydrogen and other stuff in space. That actually,
so there is friction.
There is
Whenever
friction,
we say there's no friction in space, there is some friction.
There is a small amount of friction. Once you approach light speed, that friction starts to become a real problem. But with this, you're removing the friction, you're turning that into your fuel. So it's a very efficient design.
So the name Bussard, is that the scientist who devised it?
I think it is, yes.
Okay.
So in Star Trek, they have these scoops on the front of the nacelles to take in hydrogen if they need it. I don't think they use it constantly. But so you could combine this with Project Daedalus. You could have a helium-3. You can have it as a hydrogen rocket or a helium rocket, and you can take in the extra fuel from space when you need it, make it a bit more efficient. I don't know.
Okay, next one.
Okay.
Warp drive.
Right, now we're on to the Alcubierre drive, which is essentially warp drive. Don't
really?
sigh.
Oh, cool.
This is what came out a couple of years ago. Well, actually, it's been around a lot longer, but a couple of years ago, somebody did some maths that made it more efficient and more plausible to create kind of a warp bubble.
Right. I don't actually understand what that means. You know, I've watched a lot of Star Trek, but I don't really know what the science of it is. And I know that they've talked about a warp bubble, but I just assume it's, I don't know, some plot device that they need the bubble to be there.
Well, in Star Trek, it basically
is.
And it started as a kind of a silly kind of plot device. But then they started adding science to it because they got info from scientists, made it a bit more realistic, and it kind of went in the same direction as this actual theoretical drive. The way this works is it's creating a gravitational bubble. It's a gravitational field, essentially, where there's a point of gravity in front of the craft, and essentially anti-gravity at the back. So it puts the craft on a kind of gravitational slope, so it's always falling forward.
Ah, okay.
So it's actually curving space so that there's a dip at the front and a hill at the back, so that you're on this slope. It's a good way of describing it. But
yeah, okay. Someone explained to me once about aeroplane aeroplane wings, the way that they're shaped in a certain way to create low pressure at the top,
yes,
so that it always has lift.
Yeah.
It's kind of that sort of thing, isn't it?
I guess so, yeah.
You're moving space around it to create low pressure and high pressure. This is a good Star Trek
analogy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Taking something complicated and making it something really simple. Like putting too much air in a balloon.
So, warp drive is theoretically possible then?
Yeah, it's very similar to warp drive in the way it's described.
Okay.
It's incredibly complicated, though. I mean, it's simply putting a gravitational dip at the front and a hill at the back, although in 3 dimensions, which is geometrically much harder to imagine. But how do you actually do that? How do you...
I don't know.
How do you create gravity? And
how do you create gravity?
Gravitational fields. We don't know how to do these things yet, so...
Oh, well, this, if you could create gravity, this goes on to my idea, right, that you could just throw something out the front, then it wouldn't have any gravity, but then you could turn the gravitational pull on, it would pull you towards it, and then you just collect it, and throw it out the front again. And then, you could, it then pulls you towards it.
Right. Yeah.
So that's kind of like a high-tech pulley system.
A gravitational grappling hook dragging its way
that's
through
what
space.
it is. Yeah, you just throw this thing out the front, go engage gravity, and then it pulls you towards it, and then you just pick it up.
Could you not have this mass point attached to your ship, so that it's pulling your ship towards it, and that then always pushes it forward?
No, because that'll just be like a boat with a really heavy bottom.
It would be like a diving bell with a weight at the bottom, yeah, because you want the bell to go down.
Well, it can't really pull itself.
Yes, it can.
Can it?
It can, yeah. Or would it? Would the back of the ship just spin around the front and start orbiting itself? Okay, I don't know.
Right, what's your next one?
The next one is singularities. Artificial singularities, which is basically what we're talking about here. Huge points of mass.
Okay.
So
you're not talking wormholes then?
Well, that's kind of a step up from this, isn't it?
Well, a wormhole would be like a doorway.
A wormhole is a point of mass so big that it actually punches through space-time.
Yes. But it doesn't. Hopefully, it doesn't crush the ship that you're in.
Hopefully. Oh well, no. A wormhole doesn't have to be a mass like that. It could just be a naturally forming tunnel through the curvature of space-time.
Well, there was an episode of Stargate once where they were sending a message or like this beacon up into space or something like that, and Carter explained it, or someone explained it to her, that he grabbed a stick and he said, right, to get from this end of the stick to the other end of the stick, you've got to go along the stick. And then he bent the stick so that both ends were touching, and he goes, that's what we're doing here.
Yes.
So it's warping space so that
I think the better way of explaining it is with a sheet of paper. I think the stick's a bit of a funny one for me.
Well, I think it was just the episode that he didn't have a bit of paper, he only had a stick. They were outside.
In a forest, it's Stargate, yeah.
Yeah, they're always in that same forest.
Yeah. I remember my physics teacher explaining this to me when I was in school, and I remember being absolutely fascinated by it, and this is, I think, one of the things that's actually driven me into science fiction. I remember him explaining that space is curved. We think of it as flat, but it's actually drew on the blackboard this wavy line, like a wavelength of light. Space is all curved like that, but we just can't perceive it. And what curves it is all the points of mass, and he puts the points of mass in the dips.
Oh, right, yeah.
And so we have to travel along this wavy line. It's actually quite a long path. But it'd be much easier just to cut through these hills, and that is what a wormhole does, or hyperspace. Hyperspace is the space in between the lines.
So what, hyperspace from Babylon 5?
Yeah, hyperspace in general is that space in between the curves of the universe.
Is Star Wars? They have a hyperdrive. Is that hyperspace?
Yeah, I think that's a word. Is what that is.
It's just a word they use to get between different stars.
Exactly, which is fine.
Yeah, but in Star Wars, what I'm most interested in all this is how it affects the story or the characters, and how it affects the plot of whatever it's used in. And so a hyperdrive and warp drive and whatever, it still takes time to get somewhere.
Yes.
Doesn't it?
Yeah.
They go warp factor 9 and then sit around for a bit as they go through space. Whereas something like going through a wormhole, you're instantly there.
A wormhole should actually take time, though.
Should it?
Yeah. You're still actually travelling through space-time. It's just that
Right.
space-time is distorted.
Oh, so that is like hyperspace from Babylon 5. Because they go into hyperspace, and then they're in hyperspace for some time.
The
It's not
hyperspace
like
in Babylon 5 is a very odd one. I think it's a really interesting one. It's almost like hyperspace is a dimension.
Yeah, that's it.
So
It's like they go to this place,
cut through,
and then
through space-time. They've cut through the piece of paper, and they're travelling in the space in between, and then they're punching a hole back through into normal space. And it just so happens that in this area where there is no paper, you can travel faster.
Right. Maybe there's no hydrogen friction to slow them
Yeah,
down.
there's just clouds of wibbly-wobbly stuff that was never explained. Because it's kind of a different dimension that they're in, and so perhaps different laws of physics.
What's it? Do you remember it in what was the spin-off series that had that guy in it? They found a big squid living in hyperspace.
Oh, we're talking about Babylon 5 Crusade.
Crusade, yeah, and it started humping the ship. So they found this big squid. I think we've talked about this on the podcast before.
Have we?
I don't know.
Oh, probably the episode.
I think I've talked about being humped by a squid.
Oh, right. Well, yeah, we talked about this in the Lost episode, didn't we?
Oh yeah, true, we did. All right.
We did. We talked about how interesting Babylon 5 hyperspace is and how useful it is, how it opens up some interesting possibilities for, like you say, you still have to travel, so you've still got that, the time, vulnerability to pirates, and the fact that you're not in normal space as well, it makes you slightly hidden, you're off the beaten track, and you're vulnerable.
Yeah. You're taking the high road. In Stargate, when they go in the Stargate, how long are they in the Stargate before they come out? Do they just come out at the same time they've gone in?
They experience it as being almost instantaneous, don't they?
I don't know, because you have that little animation where it goes shh.
Yeah, and I think they actually experience that.
You think they do? Okay,
yeah.
So it's not like, if you put your hand through, then you can't feel the other side. If you put your hand through...
If you put your hand
can't
through,
feel if it's raining.
It doesn't come out the other side.
Oh.
Because the Stargate transmits data in discrete packets. I'm quoting Dr. Rodney McKay here now, I think, or
Really?
Samantha Carter, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, you don't start to come out the other side until your entire body has gone in. It recognises packets of matter, individual bodies and items, and it will only transmit the whole thing through once it's recognised that the whole thing's gone in. Like, brilliant episode, the second episode of Stargate Atlantis, where the puddle jumper got stuck in the Stargate. Do you remember this?
Oh, yes. I do.
It started to go through, but it hadn't retracted its engines that come out of the side, and they stopped it from going fully in. And so the front of the ship didn't emerge on the other side. It was just dematerialized.
So where were the pilots? Where were the crew?
The pilots were in the front, and they were dematerialized. And there was some crew in the back who couldn't get through into the cockpit. The cockpit was dematerialized.
Right.
And so they were busy trying to get these drive pods in so they could fit through before the singularity of the wormhole closed, because that only lasts for 38 minutes, is it?
Something like that, yeah. Very specific.
Yeah.
So the people in the front, they only existed as pure data.
Yes.
They weren't.
Yeah.
They weren't anyway. So the reason why I asked is because I always wondered, if you stand in a Stargate sideways, right, and then half of your body is in the Stargate and half of it's not, could you see the destination through one eye and then and where you've been through the other eye? But obviously not.
No.
Obviously not. I didn't realise.
So I guess in that sense, it's not a wormhole in the sense of, say, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine wormhole. The Stargates might be working more, something to do with perhaps quantum teleportation or something.
Right.
Which it has been theorised fairly recently, that quantum teleportation could be using tiny wormholes.
Ah, right, okay.
On a tiny, subatomic level, there could be tiny wormholes transmitting information between quantum particles. So yeah, with building wormholes and wormholes that warp space-time, that's essentially what the Alcubierre drive is doing on a very small scale. It's not warping space enough to create a tunnel, but it's still warping space.
Right.
So a wormhole or hyperspace jump would just be a step up from that technology, where you could warp space to such an extent that you can actually punch through into hyperspace or punch a tunnel through. And to do that, you need a singularity, which is the one thing we haven't talked about. We kind of have a very large point of mass.
Yeah. So how would you control a large point of mass without it crushing your ship? Because a point of mass is just a very, very dense thing. If you crash into something that's dense, it's not going to suck you through, it's just going to crush you.
Yeah, I read an article a while ago about creating singularities and how much shielding you would need. And it's saying about a singularity, say the size of a pea, that could be thousands of times heavier than the sun. You would need kilometres, a shell around it is kilometres thick of pure metal, just to contain it.
Oh, right. So it's not something you could just carry around then?
Yeah, you can't just put it in a bag on the front of your shuttle.
In Star Trek, the Romulan warbirds apparently have
They had a singularity core, yeah. The thing about Star Trek technology is they had very, very powerful force fields.
Yeah, true.
So presumably you're using a force field to contain it. But
so I assume if anything goes wrong, the ship would just implode.
Yeah, if that force field failed.
Be crushed. Yeah.
That's true of Federation ships though, because they're antimatter containment pods. They're using force fields to separate the antimatter from the matter.
Yeah, but they say that when antimatter and matter mixes together, it creates an explosion.
Exactly, yeah.
Right.
So that their antimatter storage, it has to be stored in force fields. The thing about force fields, though, is they take a lot of energy. I'm saying this like they're a real thing. It's magic.
I just thought, what about all those times where the Enterprise just all the lights turned off and they had no energy left? They would have just exploded.
They always had emergency power, though, didn't they?
So, what does the TARDIS use?
Oh, goodness knows.
That is magic, isn't it? That's just magic.
That is pure magic
nonsense. It uses it draws power from an artificial singularity known as the Eye of Harmony, which is technically alive. Yeah, let's skip over that. Have you ever seen,
Let's skip over it because it's not proper science fiction, is it? It's fantasy.
Well...
We've talked about this before. It's both.
Well, it's a way to give us the stories that we want without having to worry too much about the boring technicals. Although...
I think what it is with Doctor Who is it's just so old, there's so much of it, that it's just been built into layers upon layers of insanity.
Well, they probably explained it once, and then explained it again, and then explained it again another time, and it's all completely contradictory.
And then they made it alive because it was a plot point, and then they explained it again in another way.
Right, yeah. Have you ever seen Dune?
Yes.
Have you ever heard of the Theholtzman Drive?
No.
Because I've just got an article about fast and light systems. And this one says, if you want to travel far out, you have to get far out. Frank Herbert's Dune books make great use of the Holtzman effect, a grouping of scientific phenomena that can, among other things, fold space itself. That's right, why travel off to a distant star when you can make that distant star come to you? Kind of.
Again, this is warp drive, isn't it?
Well, it's not warp drive how you described earlier. It's more the bending the sticks.
It's more like a wormhole, bending space between two very distant points. So yeah, it's more like it's bending that stick, it's folding the piece of paper, whereas a warp drive is more about creating a small ripple.
They call it fold space. It says there, in David Lynch's film version, which many purists reject, a giant space slug shoots squiggly things at a glowing gold box to initiate the drive.
Yeah, I remember that.
We need to travel in space. Quick, shoot this thing at a box.
It was weird. I remember actually quite liking the space slugs. They were reliant on these alien creatures. They were the only things that could navigate hyperspace.
I've not seen it in a long time, but actually I find that quite cool because that is an interesting plot point. I know that it's not science and it's ridiculous, but I like interesting plot points like that.
Yeah.
That they have to have power over these creatures.
Mm. It reminds me a lot of Farscape as well, with Moya, the living spaceship.
Well, Moya has Starburst.
Yes.
Which
is...
a
natural ability that's never explained.
As far as I know, that's more like the FTL thing from Battlestar. They just go instantly there, don't they?
Yeah. I really liked that it was a living ship, and I really liked their reliance on pilot as well.
Yeah.
The one alien that's tied to the ship, the only one that can fly it. I thought that was interesting.
That makes sense, actually. You've got one character who's always going to be on the ship. You know how in Star Trek, you've got the characters can just go off on a mission and whatever. But I like that you've got the one guy who's always there.
The interesting thing about Pilot for me was that he was basically a slave.
True. Well, wasn't it like a symbiotic relationship? Wasn't he part of the ship?
I think he'd chosen to join with the ship. It was like his life's ambition to join with a Leviathan and explore the galaxy, but he'd had to do so under the Peacekeepers, who he was basically a slave to. And so when they then free themselves in the first episode, he's kind of a slave to them in a way, but also
he gets his own say, surely.
He does, but they tend to ignore him quite a lot.
Oh, right, okay.
Because he can't interact with the crew as much, because he's always got to be in his pilot seat. Yeah. They treat him like an autopilot that's controlling the ship. And he quite often moans that they don't listen to him.
Yeah, do this, go there.
Yeah.
But I don't want to do it.
I think that reminds me of the biomechanoid girl in Hyperdrive. But the one that you don't like, who's a human, that she's had these implants put into her brain so that she can control the ship, and she does so with, like, gestural controls and such.
Hyperdrive. You've lost any American who's listening to this. I don't think anyone outside
I don't
think anyone outside of England, or outside of Britain, has seen Hyperdrive.
I mean, this is a BBC
Nobody likes it.
Series.
Nobody likes it apart from me and you.
It was hilarious.
I think it's brilliant, but it wasn't very popular.
Oh, brilliant show.
Hyperdrive.
So this,
it's kind of like The Office in space, wasn't it?
It was. It was very much inspired by The Office, yeah, and also Red Dwarf. And
no, that's the thing. A lot of people don't like it because they're comparing it to Red Dwarf, but it's very different.
Yeah.
I can't think of any other types of drives.
No, well, I think we've talked about that a lot actually. So I think we've covered that quite well.
I think people should tweet us because it validates our existence.
Okay.
Especially if you've listened to this, because we don't really know how many listeners we get, do we? You know, regular listeners.
We don't get much feedback, no.
I want to know when people are listening and what they're doing when they're listening. Like, are you jogging? Do you listen on your iPod when you're jogging? Do you listen when you're operating heavy machinery? Are you doing your gardening? Are you doing work? Are you writing science fiction right now? I think that might be too distracting. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'd find it really annoying if I was trying to concentrate on something and there's two people just nattering on about stuff. I'd find that really distracting, even if we are talking about science fiction stuff. So yeah, tweet us at, what is it? I can't remember. At SciFi_Ideas.
That's right, yeah.
And just tell us, I'm operating heavy machinery. You don't have to. Don't tweet it in that voice. I don't know.
And what kind of heavy machinery and how does it work?
I'm hoping that we've got people doing actual quantum mechanics and creating the next fusion drive.
Oh, that would be brilliant if somebody could write to us and say, yeah, I'm working in a physics lab, experimenting with quantum teleportation and listening to your podcast. That would be amazing.
I wouldn't believe it, though. I wouldn't believe it. I'd ask for like photo proof. Take a photo of that physics lab.
This has been the SciFi Ideas podcast. As usual, you can email us at mark@scifiedeas.com. You can send us feedback on the podcast, guest articles about science fiction, or send us a message on Facebook or Twitter. I've been Mark Ball.
And I've been David Ball.
And we'll leave you with this fun fact about sublight travel. If you could drive a car at 60 miles an hour into space, it would take you 6 months to reach the moon, 745 years to reach Jupiter, and 22,000 years to reach the edge of the solar system.
Wow.